Rams end up falling to Seattle and the Seahawks get in?
Hutton, I think the most disappointed I was all weekend in terms of just what I wanted to see in the playoffs was when the Rams lost to the Seahawks in overtime, because it was going to create another playoff game. Now, credit the Detroit Lions, who took a situation where they had no chance to go to the postseason, and they played that thing like it was a playoff game.
Yeah.
They played that with the absolute heart and pride you'd want highly paid professionals to play a game against a rival. The way I was impressed with Dan Campbell's team having that heartbreak of not, and it's a big deal for the Lions. It's not a big deal for every team. Oh, you missed the playoff 1 year, but we're an organization that'll be back. The Pittsburgh Steelers, for instance, you feel like even with them missing, they're going to be back soon because they don't have losing seasons in Pittsburgh. For Detroit, it was so much more special, meant so much more to get in. So to have that, the possibility of that happen taken away after the team you need to lose is losing for pretty much an entire game, and they win it in the end in overtime, that's disheartening. And they went out there and they played hard, and they won a game in freezing cold temperatures at Lambeau against a Packers team who had everything to play for and a spot in the playoffs on the line. So really impressed the Lions. All that being said, though, Hutton, that's when I was most disappointed. Was when the Lions weren't going to have a chance to win and end just like the Packers on Sunday Night Football last night.
Your Sunday 3-pack, starting with Miami. They get in as the final spot in the AFC. They're traveling to Buffalo. That is your noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff time, followed by your sandwich game, Minnesota hosting New York on Fox. Both of the Fox games this weekend, 4:30 Eastern kickoffs. And then Sunday Night Football will be Bengals and Ravens in the rematch. And we felt this coming, that there was a chance you get the both back-to-back matchups. And, Chad, that's the 8:15 kickoff. We await more word on Lamar Jackson. The assumption is he's going to be ready to go. But here's Joe Burrow and company as one of the favorites to get back to the Super Bowl, entering the postseason as the division winners. The window's always open for Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow's in the league. Just ask him. And this could end up being one of those top games of the top game of the entire weekend because of Baltimore's defense paired with the return of Lamar Jackson.
Hutton, they never screw it up in terms of the timing of these games. I mean, like clockwork.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly, when you tell me the matchup, I'll tell you exactly when it's going to be slotted.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to put the two worst games on that Saturday, and I could have said right away, it's going to be the night game will be Chargers, Jags. The first game's going to be the trilogy of Seahawks, 49ers that no one asked for. Those are the two that's easy. And I think that Sunday Night Football game was an easy pick also. This is the one of the three division games happening in the wild card round. This is by far the most interesting. Right? Ravens, Bengals, if Lamar Jackson is back, to me, by far the most interesting, as opposed to Geno Smith. Now, the 49ers story is interesting to me because of Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Because he's played like a top 10 quarterback in all the NFL since he's been the starter.
He hasn't lost.
So, and not only is he undefeated, but he's not just riding a great defense and supporting Cat. He looks like an elite quarterback in this offense as he's been playing. So that part of that matchup is fun for me. Outside of that, I think, once again, the NFL knows exactly what they're doing with that formula. When you look at 1 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday, Dolphins, Bills, leading into Giants, Vikings, leading into Bengals, Ravens at night. It's a nice weekend.
And then
when you look at it all together, it's a nice weekend.
A week from tonight, Tampa and Dallas, right back where we started, for their first game of the season, week 1. Now you've got the rematch in the first weekend of the postseason, where Tampa Bay will now host Dallas. Dallas comes in not playing well. You start looking around at they have a good defense. They are known for getting after the quarterback. 3 sacks, I believe, over the final 3 games of the regular season. On top of that, Dak Prescott has not been playing well in the passing game. They need to focus on the run. They can win this game. They need to focus on running the football now that they have some healthier options over the course of the last month or so to get back into the postseason. The wild card, though, pardon the pun, is Brady and Mike Evans. And last we saw them, I know he threw 15 passes yesterday in Atlanta. But last we saw them with a playoff-like atmosphere and mentality against Carolina, they went single coverage, and those two got back on track. And if that's the case, Tampa can go toe-to-toe here. Not just with Dallas, but advance. I think they would have to go most likely through Dallas and then Philly, who gets the bye.
It's so crazy to think about, the full circle nature of things with this season. The way this season started in that game, 19-3, the Bucs won that opener.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about, and it feels like 2 years ago that Dak Prescott hurt his hand. They got a helmet or got hit by another hand, right? He's out for 4 weeks. And I remember thinking, Cowboys are 0-1, schedule's about to be very tough. And they got their first win, I think, in the next week they beat Cincinnati. Remember, that was when Cincinnati started 0-2. And that was shocking that Cooper Rush was able to do that. But I remember thinking then, man, can Cooper Rush, after this 0-1 start, just keep the Cowboys relevant enough to where they're a factor for the playoffs late in the year? And instead, he does very well. Dak Prescott comes back, does well. Cowboys are one of the favorites to possibly make a run and go to the Super Bowl. And here's Tampa Bay starting 1-0 in Dallas, and then everything falls apart. But they find a way to win a bad division. And now here we are hosting again where they went on the road to Dallas. I just think it's fun to think about where those two teams started in terms of perception, what we thought after that game, and now what we think about these two teams playing on Monday Night Football in the playoffs. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I will not be surprised in the least if Tom Brady comes up with some monster performance with Mike Evans and they're able to beat the Cowboys. And if the Cowboys are one and done, Mike McCarthy is gone. Mark my word. They will do everything they can to trade for Jerry Jones' favorite, Sean Payton, to get back. I truly believe this is a win or you're fired scenario for Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, the pressure's on. And the pressure has been on there this season for him. But we previewed the season by saying Jerry Jones is not getting any older. He was actually extremely patient with Jason Garrett. And what he would say about Jason Garrett, people are like, okay, sure. You're gonna fire him sooner rather than later, and move on to the next coach. But he stuck with them, and now with McCarthy, and back-to-back years where this is an NFL offense that, for the most part, week in, week out, can put up 30+ on you. Dak Prescott, lowest career completion percentage in the history of Dak Prescott in Dallas, happened yesterday against Washington, and they've been flirting with bringing in other receivers, and they trade away options, but then CeeDee Lamb, is capable of going off and being a true number one, but it hasn't been consistent enough. And to me, if they don't go through Pollard and Elliott, he's out because I think they'll lose the game.
I could see T.Y. Hilton, if the Cowboys go on a run, I could see T.Y. Hilton becoming a storyline this playoffs. He's not been huge, but I feel like sort of in the vein of Odell Beckham Jr. for the Rams, he's going to make some veteran plays in big spots for the Cowboys that's going to surprise.
McCarthy finally set Prescott with like 5 minutes left in that game yesterday. Tried to stick with him, just get them out of the funk. And that was a situation where if Dallas won and Philly lost, well, Dallas is going to win the division. Didn't happen. And for McCarthy's sake, Prescott didn't get hurt in this game either. He's thrown, though, at least one interception in 7 straight games. That's the longest streak of his career. And he finishes the regular season with the most interceptions of any quarterback this year. And that's saying something because we started the conversation by saying he was hurt in week 1 and it took a while to get him back. And he puts the ball in harm's way. They still put up points, though. That's the key. They'll turn it over. By and large, they're putting up 30+, which is tough to keep up with.
And they've got a dangerous defense.
For sure. Which of the road teams this weekend do you think is the biggest threat, the team that you would not want to play?
Well, I don't know that it's the team that I wouldn't want to play as much as I just think they're going to win and win pretty easily, the Chargers. I think Jacksonville is cooked in this home game. Now, that was a great atmosphere they had at home in what was another playoff game for them on Saturday night against the Titans, just watching on television. But I like the Chargers and Herbert to go in there and win outright and move on. But, I mean, in terms of danger, I think it's the team we're just talking about. right, of road teams, it's the Cowboys, who's just a better team than Tampa. I mean, it's going to be an upset to me if Tampa wins this home game against Dallas. Won't shock me, but it's going to be a pretty big upset based on the rosters of both of those teams. So who could, two different answers. Which road team do I like the most this weekend to win? If I've got a confidence pool going and I'm trying to pick a winner, I'm going Chargers 1, Cowboys 2. Who's the most dangerous to win more games? Cowboys.
See, I think the winner of Chargers Jags is my answer in the AFC. Both teams coming in, winning when they need to. I think there's more pressure for sure. It sounds crazy because they're not at home. There's more pressure on Staley and the Chargers. He could be another one to watch out for. It all depends on the pairing of the quarterback with the offensive-minded coach that these owners are seeking, and if they're willing to trade and go get Sean Payton. But yesterday, Staley keeping the starters in there way too long, I thought. And it ends up, you've got Mike Williams, who has back issues now. Back spasms kept him out of the game for the majority of all of the second half, and nearly 3 full quarters. And they also lose Bosa in that game as well to a nagging injury. So they could have rested more than what they did. But this is very similar to the approach that Jacksonville took in Week 17, not Week 18, where they're trying to just keep the rhythm going. It's a very interesting matchup because the Chargers have been playing well, but it's not like they've been posting a ton of points. Meanwhile, the Jags have been until Week 18, where it was a struggle the entire night on Saturday.
Yeah, I just thought that game was a huge moment for Trevor Lawrence because he's been playing so well and playing so much better.
Yeah.
Where I was just – the Jags won the game, but I was expecting Trevor Lawrence to make a huge play late to win that game, and he didn't win anything. I felt like they won by default because of a screwy call. I mean, 50-50 if it's a fumble or pass or incomplete pass. Honestly.
First glance, I thought they got it right.
I thought, look, I'm no big conspiracy theorist. Hutton has better conspiracies than I do. I do think that quarterback bias is a real thing in the NFL, and I think if that's Tom Brady throwing the ball, I think it's called incomplete pass on the field, and I think what would have probably been a fumble would have been upheld because of the call on the field, because it would have been so close. I think it's a lot easier to call a fumble and then quickly, I didn't even know how they looked at it. They quickly said the call is confirmed on the fumble on a guy who's making his second start in his 7th year in the NFL, and getting Trevor Lawrence to the playoffs is better than getting Josh Dobbs to the playoff. Again, I'm not making a huge argument that it's definitely an incomplete pass. I think it was closer and deserved a closer look than it was because of where the ball was going and where it was hit. But either way, it was the Jags defense making the big play on a guy who had been there 17 days, that didn't pick up the hot route, that had no clue someone was coming unblocked, and that was the difference in the game.
Which you should know based on this O-line.
Yes, and I thought the Titans, game plan-wise, gave them a chance. Defense played great, played inspired. Josh Dobbs made some big fourth down throws.
He was great in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story of the Titans season, too. Great in the first half at times and terrible in the second half. And he wasn't terrible in the second half. They were just doing enough to tread water to try to hold off and try to hold the Jags to a bunch of yards, but a field goal at the end of it to win the game. And then that happened, and it was over.
Jacksonville gets in playing well, but I think for as much as Lawrence did not play well, the fact that the defense came up with that play to send them to the postseason, I think there's dividends on the back end of that. You know, someone other than Trevor Lawrence stepped up and made a massive play. You know, like, to me, that sparks more than just, oh, the franchise quarterback made this play. The team picked up the poor play of the offense, and the offense hasn't been the problem for the Jags by and large throughout the final 3 months of the season. It's offense against offense, and it's Herbert who's already there, right? But they're back to the postseason, but he's there with the hierarchy of the AFC quarterbacks. And now Trevor Lawrence, by virtue of a win in the postseason, you can now jumpstart that discussion too. By the Titans not losing, they have not been able to stunt the growth of Trevor Lawrence. They could have had him wait another year to even have the opportunity to have that first postseason experience. And now in year 2, in a year and a half removed from Urban Meyer, and paired with Doug Peterson, who's done this before, they have a lot of things clicking in their favor.
Absolutely.
I trust Peterson more than I do Staley.
Yeah, I still just, if they're going to win now, and I thought this on Saturday night, and it didn't require it because the Titans' offense is so bad. But he's going to have a huge game, huge moments against Herbert and the Chargers if they're going to advance.
Yes, I'm with you. The Bills, first play, opening kickoff, 96-yard kickoff return for a touchdown from Nyheim Hines. What a moment yesterday on the first play since they had a no contest due to the injury to Damar Hamlin.
Speaking of conspiracy theories, how perfect is that? I'm not saying that they allowed them to do it, but the fact that Sean McDermott said, we're deferring. They lose the toss, the only way it happens. Bill Belichick likes to defer to the second half. And Nyheim Hines goes 96 yards. Clearly, it was just a bad special teams day for the Patriots.
It wasn't straight down the field.
Then he went 101 yards after that. But he's untouched. He goes through one crease and breaks it to the sideline. He's gone for a 96-yard return. Incredible moment. I was watching it live when it happened. And, the surprise in Jim Nance's voice as it starts out as a routine, going to get some good yardage here. And wait a minute. And it was short of a do you believe in miracles Al Michaels call, but it was nonetheless surprising that's how that game opened with everything going on with the Bills. Really cool.
Coming up, we take a look at the college football playoff and the matchups tonight, Georgia and TCU. Amy Dash will join us in roughly 15 minutes. We'll get into the Chris Beard situation down in Austin, Texas. Trey Wallace will also join us from Los Angeles, and we'll dive deeper into Georgia, TCU. That's all straight ahead on OutKick 360.
Back to the Christian thing in the broad picture. Your father, how many kids, if you don't mind saying, do you have several kids? One kid?
Seven children.
You have 7 children, so you're a big family man. I did not know that.
Yes.
How many sons? Because this is what I kind of want to dig into.
I have 5 sons.
5 sons, perfect. As a Christian man, how do you feel, like, what is your job when it comes to raising young men in modern America?
Number one, to teach my boys to know and love Jesus. That would be their primary identity in life. To everything else being completely secondary to that. That is number one. Number 2 would be to make them capable men, right? To make them well-rounded, to make them, able to handle themselves, to make them strong physically, able to fight, able to shoot, able to protect their future, their own families. A great quote, Robert Heinlein, and I'm going to butcher it, but I will attempt it anyways. He basically says that, a man should be able to plan an invasion, change a diaper, cook a meal, build a house, he just goes down this list of, you should be able to do all these things as a man. And then at the very end, he says specialization is for insects. And I did not always think that. All right. I mean, there was times in my life where I didn't care about learning how to weld or be mechanically inclined or any of these other things. I was like, I just want to be a commando. I just want to go and shoot and do hard stuff. And that was a mistake. I mean, I think I've said this before on, I did 2 ship deployments, 2 ARG deployments as a young frogman. And honestly, I was arrogant at the time. And man, here you're on a ship, which was kind of miserable. And I had a bad attitude about it instead of, because I'm like, I should be on land training more. And instead of going, okay, this is where I'm at. Yeah, I don't have to like it, but there's all these master machinists and welders and guys that are, in charge of charts and navigation, to navigate across the globe. And here I could have, if I would have showed just a little bit of interest, those guys would have been happy to be like, oh yeah, I'll teach you how to weld. I'll teach you how to run a lathe, all these things that now I'm like, man, I want to learn all that stuff. I want to be able to do everything. and some of that's reinforced now. Kind of, we live out on a little bit of a farm, so you do need to be able to, when stuff breaks, you need to be able to fix it yourself, and so there's a lot of value in that. So I want, number one, I want my boys to know and love Jesus, and then number two, to be capable. It's actually, so we do a program called Father-Son Ministry, where it's gone through different iterations. Currently, the way we run it is you show up, we pray, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we start training. And that was very deliberate right there, that, hey, we honor God first, then we honor our nation, and then we start to train. Most of the time we do jiu-jitsu. So that's been just super cool, having the boys go from it just looking clownish, them rolling around, to, man, they're, some of those boys, I will actually, break a sweat rolling with them now, and they will absolutely catch some guys with triangles and arm bar. Like, they're actually learning jiu-jitsu.
Tonight, Stetson Bennett against Max Duggan as Georgia takes on TCU, and it's also Sonny Dykes head-to-head against Kirby Smart and the college football playoff experience. Saban's been dominating this, but now here's Georgia going for back-to-back crowns. Bennett can become the 8th quarterback to win back-to-back national championships as a college quarterback, the first since A.J. McCarron did it. And meanwhile, here's Kirby Smart about to, and many believe, deliver back-to-back championships at Georgia, and did so last year for the first time in 41 years. But the job that Sonny Dykes has done with TCU, can they pull it off with the head-to-head matchups against the best in the game right now? And that's Georgia's staff, and it starts with Kirby Smart.
TCU a year ago, 5-7, and with a legend at coach in Gary Patterson, a legend for that school, picked 7th in the Big 12, bottom half of the league to start the season. One of the most, if not the most improbable participant in this type of game that we've ever seen. A 12.5-point favorite that starts to creep back up a little bit. It get down to 12. I think the late money's coming in on Georgia. Some of the smarter money coming into the Bulldogs late once that number crept down a little bit. I think a big part of this is Miller the great running back for TCU, his availability. They tried to play him in the second half, couldn't do it against Michigan. If he can get 10 to 15 productive carries tonight, that's a huge boost for TCU. DeMarcado was good as a reserve in that game, but that's a big factor because TCU is a good running team. They're not the same, though, without Miller, who was maybe their best player on offense throughout the year, with him and Duggan, the Heisman finalist, obviously, but he's a big part of that Horned Frog offense. So if he can't go, advantage Bulldogs.
Yeah, and the other thing, like TCU answered Michigan, even as Michigan pulled the comeback, right? And you get the 51-45 finish. Can TCU do that on Georgia? Can you force what Ohio State forced and then have your guy make a play at the end? Have your kicker make the kick? Because I don't foresee this being, if TCU is winning this game, this isn't 26-21, right? This is Georgia pedal to the metal, and can TCU return serve? Because they did it very well against Michigan.
And Georgia's defense, as the season got late, really from kind of mid-November after that Tennessee went on, their defense hasn't quite been the same. They gave up 30, a lot of that in the second half in scrub time against LSU in the SEC championship. They give up the 41 against Ohio State. But the way Ohio State did it with those great receivers, best receiver group in the country, and C.J. Stroud, they made Georgia's secondary look bad. I don't know that TCU, the way they play, even though they're explosive, has the ability to run those intermediate routes, to throw it 15 to 20 yards down the field and make them look consistently bad the way Ohio State could. So then it becomes a game of, can Max Duggan will himself running the football to first downs and move the sticks for TCU against this Georgia defense?
Unless Johnston ends up being the talk of the game.
I just think
and he's a first-round pick.
That's a tall task, I think, for Duggan in this game. It's just there's a lot of reasons. I love TCU's story and their season, and they're a really good team, obviously, to be in this point. The more I look at it, I do not like this matchup for the Horned Frogs in this game. And I think Georgia has survived their scare, and they're not getting a big scare tonight.
I have always doubted TCU all year. They're going to lose.
What's one more time?
They're going to lose.
What's one more time?
Well, they burned me. The one time that I'm backing them, they end up losing to Kansas State. And since then, I thought it was a terrible matchup for them against Michigan. And we saw what happened. It is a massive task, though. I just want a tough, competitive game in the fourth. A reason to watch some drama in the fourth quarter. If that's the case, as a college football fan, we're all massive winners in that, because it has been a great playoff to this point. And I also wish that this game was played on a Saturday instead of a Monday.
I do too. Doesn't feel very college football-ish.
That's right.
To play this on Monday night.
Coming up, Amy Dash will join us. Speaking of the state of Texas, we'll discuss the University of Texas and Chris Beard being out, fired with cause, and what's next. We lead that next.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking it's going to be practicing the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Just like that, the second hour of the Monday edition is here. Putnam and Withrow with you. OutKick 360 rolls on. Plenty of football headlines. We've been hitting that through the first hour. We'll continue to do so. In about 20 minutes, we'll head out to Los Angeles. Our Trey Wallace is there on behalf of OutKick. We'll preview.
He's not tailgating.
Georgia. No, he's not.
We know that.
No one is.
Tailgating?
No one is.
Strictly prohibited at this game, so he'll not be doing that, but he will be in L.A.
Damar Hamlin is headed to Buffalo. Released
Great
from
news.
the University of Cincinnati Medical Center earlier today. And he releases this statement: headed home to Buffalo today with a lot of love on my heart. Watching the world come together around me on Sunday was truly an amazing feeling. Now, he will be monitored by a hospital in Buffalo, but the UC Medical Center doctors that have been working with him and tending to him say, I can confirm he's doing well, and this is the beginning of the next stage of his recovery. Amazing, after a week after he collapsed on the field with cardiac arrest. Plenty of headlines from the last week or so throughout all of that. One of those was Chris Beard being fired with cause at Texas for the domestic violence charges that are headed his way. And with more, we say hello to Amy Dash, friend of the show. You can, of course, catch her with Odyssey. She's the legal expert there. League of Justice. She's the founder. Amy, great to see you.
And nice to see you guys. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Only a matter of time with the firing of Chris Beard when you saw this and the charges that were or have been levied against him, given the fact of, well, it's going to take some time and the serious nature of this. I'm assuming this was kind of a no-brainer when you saw the headline last week.
In terms of his firing, that he was
Yes.
going to be fired, yeah, I thought that it was just a matter of time after the suspension that he would be fired. just because there was a 911 call, there were serious allegations, and he was arrested on a felony charge. And so in most of these contracts, especially with public universities, a felony is a major no-no, and it's an express cause for immediate termination with cause.
What was your reaction when the victim in this case issued that statement recounting this? I don't know. I don't have the legal background. I don't, investigate situations like this often, but in reading a lot about it, Amy, apparently this is a pretty common thing where the victim will come back after the fact and recant different parts of the story, not wanting the perpetrator to get in trouble because of it. Did this seem pretty common in what was being claimed after the fact from the victim?
It's really hard to say because we don't know what happened behind closed doors. So Beard was alleging that basically his glasses were ripped off his face, they were broken, and that he wasn't the initial aggressor, that he was defending himself. But then on the other side, his fiance saying that he impeded her breathing for a couple of seconds, that he had his hands around her neck, allegedly choking her, and then walked that back and said, well, that was in the police report, and police said I said that to them, but I didn't actually tell them that that's what happened. So it's really hard to know what happened. Like, for example, if in fact he did choke her and she walks back the statements because she didn't want to get him in trouble, then you would say, that's kind of a sad situation because you have a person who is allegedly stuck in a cycle of abuse, who's acting emotionally and still attached to the person who's physically harming them, trying to protect that person. Maybe she has her own personal interests. It's a large contract, tens of millions of dollars. When you reflect on a situation that gets heated later on and realize that the breadwinner or the person who's bringing in all this money, who's supporting you, is now losing tens of millions of dollars, and you're slated to get married to that person, and you are too, obviously you're going to try to remedy that situation. However, if that didn't happen, what was in the police report, and, there was a little bit of scuffle, but it wasn't serious physical contact between the two. Like maybe she's, she broke his glasses and he slaps her hand away or something like that, and there's arguing. You just never know. There may have been no physical contact. Is it likely? Probably not. But I hate to jump to conclusions when I'm not there to know, whether she's just blaming herself and, under the control of her abuser or alleged abuser, or whether in fact this was something that, was manipulated, the situation, because they were both so heated in the moment.
You're a great legal insider, so you don't jump to conclusions. So allow us to jump to conclusions for you. Okay. And just throw out this hypothetical. Let's say that you've got an uncooperative victim here or witness to this. That decides, already recanted her story once, does not cooperate with authorities. The DA, everyone, they have no other option but to drop the charges completely against Chris
Which is
Beard.
the likely scenario. Yeah, without cooperation, that's the likely scenario.
So with that likely scenario, how likely is the scenario that Chris Beard is getting all or a lot of his buyout money from Texas if charges are completely dropped?
Oh, no, I don't think so at all. Absolutely not. Because why would they voluntarily pay him such a high salary if he's not going to, they're going to try to pay him as little as possible.
Oh, I know what they're going to try to do. I'm saying from Chris Beard's representation.
Oh, in terms of a lawsuit. And by the way, Chad,
Yeah.
just so you know, a lot of times victims won't cooperate, not because they're blaming themselves and they have some sort of Stockholm syndrome, but because maybe they're being paid not to cooperate.
Right.
By the person.
Well,
so
and Sam,
in terms of litigation.
Yeah.
That's what you're asking. In terms of litigation, he's got virtually no case. I think he's going to attempt to litigate because there's so much money at stake. But I think Mike Leach tried that with Texas Tech, and it was unsuccessful because Texas is one of the few states in the nation that has sovereign immunity clause that protects the public universities. So you actually need the legislature's permission to sue. There are a couple of exceptions. There's one special statute that outlines exceptions, but none of those really apply here, and most of those relate to personal injury claims. So it's interesting because because you might think to yourself, well, that doesn't make sense because all the contracts would be null and void, right? So you're entering into an employment contract with a university and you can't even rely on them facing any liability because they're sovereignly immune. So why would you even enter into a contract? It's almost like it means nothing. But when they enter into the contract, they expressly waive their immunity from liability, but not their immunity from being sued. So you can sue them because they've waived their immunity from liability, but you still need the legislature's permission or a special statute giving you the permission to actually bring the lawsuit. So it's totally in the university's favor, and it's completely tricky. A lot of times you can try to make the argument that if there's an express provision in the contract, meaning something's expressly laid out, like it says, for example, in his situation, the university, before it releases him, and I'm making this up, I don't know the terms of his contract, but before it releases him, has to do an investigation. And part of that investigation has to be that they have to interview him and the alleged victim, which his attorney is claiming they didn't do. So then you would go to court and say, well, they violated an express procedural provision here that requires a certain steps in an investigation that were objectively never taken. So because they violated that express provision, now they've waived sovereign immunity. Sometimes you can do that. But again, you still need permission to sue. So you have to go to the legislature, try to get a resolution. And that's what Mike Leach did. And it was unsuccessful because they're not going to be sympathetic to somebody who's facing these types of charges, whether they're true or not.
And we know all these huge contracts, they have morality clauses and clauses for arrest and things like this. Amy, is it your understanding that the language in most of these contracts would be charged with a felony, you're fired with cause, and not convicted of a felony?
Yeah, it's a smart question because he was arrested on a felony.
Yes.
So what if the prosecutor, like you said, decides not to bring the felony charge? And so, yeah, if it's that specific, but my hunch is that it's broader and that there are also catch-alls in these contractual clauses. For example, the university attorney said something like it was conduct unbecoming of the university, and it's an independent determination from whether or not the prosecution goes forward. So there might be some language in there that says if your conduct unbecoming of the university, sort of like conduct detrimental in football, then we can do this. And they know that they have all of the leverage in this situation because of the sovereign immunity clause.
And how broad is it, Amy Dash, our guest, whenever they say that the events impaired his ability to effectively lead our program? That's extremely broad. And I'm assuming on the university's end, you can interpret that in many ways. And meanwhile, Beard's team is going to, if we get down this path, try to really pinpoint what exactly that would mean.
Well, it depends on if you're Chris Beard. I mean, if you are not going to face any charges, and by the way, there's a likelihood that maybe he pleads down to a misdemeanor just to get this done. If he doesn't have a criminal record, he gets probation and he moves on with his life. So if you're him and you're not prosecuted and you're able to move away on the criminal side, and let's say you don't have to deal with any type of civil suit, you pay off the alleged person. This is all hypothetical, of course. He might say, how would this impede my ability to move forward in coaching this team? I had a bad night. This is a personal matter. We've moved past it. I'm not facing any consequence. There's going to be no ongoing litigation. I'm back and I'm ready to coach this team.
So, Amy, I've got to completely just talking about all this. Another hypothetical popped in my mind, and you may be able to answer this. You may not. So last night in the NFL game where Quay Walker pushes down the medical personnel person and gets ejected from the game, right? We know that if a fan enters the field of play, they waive all rights at that point. So when an NFL player, tackles the fan and they get injured, they have waived their right to sue for the most part. I know you can sue at any time, but they're probably not going to win when they go out onto the field of play. If there's a support staff person, obviously this person was not hurt by the little shove, but let's say that a football player in a game decides they're angry at someone on the sideline, hits them, makes physical contact with them, injures them in some way. I'm not talking about another player or even a coach. Support staff person that's employed by an NFL team. Can they sue a player for doing something like that?
Yeah, they could sue, and there could also be criminal charges for assault, like you've seen in a lot of on-the-field skirmishes. I mean, even what happened with Michigan State. between players, between coaches, between any type of staff. Yeah, there can be criminal charges and there can be a civil suit, but a civil suit is going to be really hard to win if there's no actual bodily injuries. But you could always have a criminal charge, which is likely not going to happen because of the politics behind it all, right? Because the team's going to get involved and the person who works for the team's not going to want to make a big deal. So that's not going to happen. But it could happen because assault doesn't even have to be physical contact. It could just be the threat of physical contact, or even more, loose about in terms of the actual definition of it. It could be the perception that somebody's going to hurt you, and a reasonable person would have that same perception.
Yeah, it's
and the person who's almost going to hurt you or who threatens to hurt you might say, well, I had no idea that would put that person in fear of me actually assaulting them.
And it's crazy we're even thinking or talking about this after the week we've had supporting medical personnel and first responders.
Yeah, that was
with
odd
Damar
last
Hamlin,
night,
but it was an odd situation. It just clicked in my head thinking about that. When players hit another player, get into a skirmish on the field, or there's a shoving match, if someone were to get injured, they're not going to sue someone else. But when it's someone else employed by the team that's out there, that's on the field of play, anyway, but hope that doesn't happen often. That's certainly something we don't see very often from last night.
I mean, people will sue if there's real bodily injury. Like, I remember something happened. I cover so much, so the details are a little vague, but with Conor McGregor and the bus, I don't know if you remember that UFC, and one of the other UFC fighters sustained permanent damage to his eye, and he sued his
It had like
colleague.
glass in his eye or something.
Yeah, and it had blinded him in part, at least, and he sued his colleague civilly.
And I
So
mean,
never say never.
and he's only fighting. That guy's probably only fighting 3 times in a year, and it kept him out of that fight. So he's also suing for the money that he would have made just by making weight, which was that was a press conference or something that day. So he was on pace to make weight too. So yeah, that is very, very interesting. Amy, thank you for the perspective here. I feel like we're just getting started with this process with Chris Beard in Texas, and it's going to be really fascinating if there are no charges brought and his immediate response from his attorneys and legal team.
Yeah, though I think it's just going to be blowing a lot of smoke, unfortunately for him, and I think it's going to be tossed right away. But, Leach ended up getting a $400,000 a year, I think, severance package for 4 years. So, yeah, if you think about him losing $25 million on a 5-year contract that's remaining, it's a lot of money, but it's not like he's going to be left empty-handed. I'm sure he's going to get something, something similar, a couple $100,000 a year, which is a lot of money for most people to live on, to not work.
Yeah, let's go with the most likely scenario here. The charges are eventually dropped, but he doesn't get a dime because he's been fired with cause. A year or two from now, Amy Dash is the legal counsel for a university, and your AD comes to you and says, we want to hire Chris Beard. What is your legal advice to the AD in terms of due diligence when because we know someone's going to hire him at some point.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be free to be hired by whoever he wants. I think they're probably going to want to see that he went into some sort of anger management or rehab or therapy. Of course, it might help if he's not in that relationship, if they feel that relationship has some sort of a history of this type of contentious conduct. So yeah, it's a PR look, as we've seen. People wait for things to blow over, and then they go after somebody if they feel that they're qualified and they can get them a win. Certainly, he's proved that he's a good enough coach to get rehired, and maybe they'll sit down with him, and maybe they'll sit down with the fiance if she's still part of the picture and say, tell us your version of events. And that's what happened with the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson. They chose to believe his version of events. They put their faith in him. And, that's probably Chris Beard's probably going to have to be very convincing.
Follow her on social at Amy-TV with Odyssey and the founder of League of Justice. Amy, thank you for the perspective. We'll catch up soon.
Okay. Take care, guys.
All right. There's Amy Dash. Coming up, we go from their great legal analysis to Los Angeles, where we
a lot of lawyers in Los Angeles, too.
Oh, no doubt. Trey Wallace previews the national championship game, TCU trying to take down Georgia. Next on OutKick 360.
Man, just getting into the craziness. We've got the college football playoff championship game coming up on Monday. But looking back, Your opinion, semifinal Saturday was just so wild, and getting to watch these games and coming down to the wire and the back and forth. Let's start off with Michigan TCU. You got Max Duggan and the way that he played, Jim Harbaugh and his squad. It just seemed like they kind of laxed out there in the middle, and TCU took advantage. And what were your takeaways of how TCU is now playing for a national championship?
I was pretty stunned that it happened and pretty stunned by the way it happened. So I guess going in, if you were to tell me an upset's going to happen, not the craziest thing in the world. I didn't expect it, but it's not a wild concept that a 9-point favorite or underdog can win a game. When you start to see it play out and you realize Michigan has these weapons that have gotten them to where they are, and they are electing not to use those weapons. Inside zone was a figment of your imagination in that game. Just didn't happen. Therefore, using J.J. McCarthy's legs really didn't happen. The way that you had seen it happen earlier in the season, using Donovan Edwards down inside the 5, where they got inside twice and scored 0 points from those trips, didn't happen. So I was sort of incredulous watching how it was unfolding. So here's what's funny. We were at the Peach Bowl, and that game's getting ready to happen, and I was on the field watching warm-ups, and I was standing there talking. Let me whisper. I was standing there talking with Urban Meyer, and he is watching the video board along with a lot of the other Ohio State staffers. And so it's kind of always a surreal environment. If you've ever been at that late playoff game, the early game's happening as your game's getting warmed up. And if you're in a stadium that has a big video board, like Mercedes-Benz has that ribbon board, it's on and the players can see it. And certainly the fans are reacting. So when TCU would score, Urban Meyer's just like going crazy, like a pure fanboy, just cheering like openly. And you're seeing some of the players on the field acknowledge it. And you're seeing some of the staffers on the sideline acknowledge it and like cheer. And all the while you're saying, hold on, we got a game that's going to kick off here in an hour. I'm not saying they weren't focused. I'm just saying it was a weird dynamic. But yeah, watching that unfold, and then just you knew what was immediately going to come after that. And that was Michigan lost. Okay, now we start up the Jim Harbaugh NFL rumor train, and that's going on even as we speak. So I was a little dumbfounded, to be honest with you. Not that they lost, but the manner in which they lost.
Is that going to transition? And I know we'll get into Georgia here in just a minute, but we've seen teams in the past where they get all up for one game and they put it all on the line. And then come that second game, and I'm not even just talking about playoffs. I could be talking about regular season as well. Can TCU do that again? Can they have that same type of energy? Can they play that same type of defense, and which was lacking in the third quarter? But I'm saying, can they get up for that type of game one more time?
I don't doubt they'll be up, but there are things that have to happen. You can call it disrespecting TCU if you want to. I fully respect the program, but we got to be real here. We're talking about a 12 or 13-point spread for a reason. There are things Georgia would have to do to assist them. Football happens that way sometimes. It just happened in the Michigan game. Michigan did some things to assist them. Credit TCU for grabbing the game and taking it. If Georgia doesn't do that, no, I don't think any amount of hype or being up will matter, because Georgia's a better team than you. They're that much better than you. If you can start to pull them out into the deeper end of making some mistakes, whether they be self-inflicted or whether you can steal a possession or two, onside kicks, fake punts, etc., all of which I think will have to be pulled out of the bag by TCU in this game.
Tonight at SoFi, Georgia and TCU for the national championship. Welcome back. OutKick 360 rolls on. Trey Wallace with us from OutKick.com. He's out in California covering the game tonight and all of the reaction and all of the coverage leading up to kickoff in a couple of hours. It's right now at OutKick. Trey, hope things are well.
Yeah, it's good. It's a rainy, gloomy day, so thank goodness the game is indoors tonight, or at least has a roof. I don't know if you want to call it indoors, but it's got a roof. So, yeah, getting excited. Georgia, TCU here in a couple hours, and there's a lot of purple here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and the discussion Vrabel put out some report that they hadn't sold out of their ticket allotment, which is not true. The AD came back over the top and was like, in fact, we've turned a lot of people away. But Chad and I discussed at the end of last week, how could you not go to this game if you're a TCU Horned Frog?
I trust Richard Nixon more than I trust Darren Rovell. But no, I think that, look, overall, like it's just an environment where last night, you got Georgia fans barking, you got TCU fans going back and forth, and you can't mess up this moment. It's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Now maybe TCU gets a shot down the road again, and they're doing this, but I think overall, what I'm seeing from fans and talking with fans is like, we're not missing out on this. Like, this is huge for us. This is huge for our program. If we pull it off, it'll be magnificent. So I look at this game and I just feel like, this could be a shocking result if TCU were to pull this thing off, and talk about just elevating your program and taking it even further if Sonny Dykes can do it. So it's a big task tonight against Georgia, but don't put anything past Max Duggan and the Horned Frogs.
Hey, Trey, what do you think about this quarterback matchup? Just, skill set wise, talent wise. Stetson Bennett, we know obviously is very clutch, put up great numbers this year. Max Duggan hasn't played in a national championship game, but looked pretty good in their win over Michigan. Not great passing, but really good running the ball. What do you make of I know they're not going to be on the field at the same time, but quarterback matchup head-to-head between Bennett and Duggan?
Yeah, I feel like this is you got two quarterbacks that are almost alike in a way. Stetson likes to run the ball whenever he breaks down the pocket does, and so does Max Duggan. I think you're going to see a little bit more out of Duggan when it comes to rushing the football tonight. But I like the quarterback comparison. If you're straight up looking at it, I think when you see Max Duggan, you're like, okay, this is the type of quarterback, in my opinion, that can make the passes down the field. The same as Stetson Bennett, but he's relied on more. Without Kendre Miller tonight, if TCU does not have him at full go, and I don't expect him to be at full go with a coming off a sprained MCL with only 1 week to prepare for that, Duggan's going to have to be a different quarterback tonight compared to the way Stetson Bennett plays. So this game just for some reason screams like back and forth quarterback battle. Let's see who's gritty enough to make the plays down the field and especially rushing the football. So I am very, very intrigued. If TCU's defense gets after Stetson Bennett, knocks him out of the game, or if Max Duggan gets knocked out of the game, like this thing could flip really quick. And I promise you, after talking with some folks, the defense is going to be headhunting tonight.
There's no end in sight with Georgia's dominance. That's for sure. But the back-to-back titles would put them in rarefied air, and you start discussing dynasty more than just top program. They're already on top of the mantle, but they have a chance to really solidify any argument against it.
Isn't it crazy? The conversation changes about Georgia. Like this is a program we see recruiting well and we see doing well in the field. But if they can only lose one game in 2 seasons, like this is domination. This is Alabama level. And if they can get to that point, Kirby puts himself at a different level in college football. Period. You have to think about it this way too. Stetson Bennett, of all quarterbacks, guys, 3 years ago, if we just said Stetson Bennett is going to leave Georgia as the breaking records, single season passing records, breaking records with back-to-back national championships, rushing yards, we probably, we'd have called each other crazy. But you look back on it now, and I think with Georgia, there is this dominance on defense along the defensive line. And then you've got an offense that just gets it done. Like, you can rush the football. If Stetson needs to, he can hit you with the play action. Like tonight, that's what I'm interested in. What kind of pass rush can Georgia get? And then it sets up with Stetson. Okay, what's he look like in the pocket? Can he pick off, D Winters, linebacker for TCU across the middle? Like, just, I know people look at this game and they say, oh, Georgia's 13.5-point underdog. Favorite. TCU doesn't have a chance. They don't have Condre Miller. Like, these guys have done this multiple times this year. And I'm talking about TCU, have won games that maybe folks didn't think they'd pull out. And I know Georgia is a different animal, but this is a group of kids that, man, they just go out there and they just win games. And I just feel like we're going to see a electrifying performance in the first half. Now, does TCU get worn down in the second half? Maybe, but we've seen them just battle back in second halves all season long. Look what they did against Michigan last week. So what do we get tonight? Hopefully we get 4 quarters of good football that comes down to the last possession, and it's not some 30-point blowout, and maybe TCU shocks the world. On the other hand, maybe Georgia goes back-to-back, and we look at this little run right here as maybe the most dominant we've seen in years.
And certainly most of the people nationally that don't have money on the Bulldogs tonight will be rooting for TCU in this game to knock off Georgia in a big upset and what would be a crazy story as a 2-touchdown underdog if TCU wins a national title, given everything. One more point, though, about Georgia, Trey. This staff is just very Georgia. So where most dynasties get picked apart on their staff, Will Muschamp is a Georgia grad. No one came calling for him this offseason. Kirby Smart's never going to leave. There's not a job in America that he's going to take, even in the NFL, other than his alma mater and a dynasty that he's built. And then Monken is 56 years old. Normally, programs that are this good are worried about their assistants being rated every single offseason. They lost Dan Lanning a year ago, but I don't know that that's going to happen with this Georgia dynasty right now.
I don't think so. I talked to Will Muschamp 2 days ago yesterday at Media Day, and he told me straight up, like, I'm not ready to get back into head coaching. He told me that there was a time in 2012 when he was told by the Florida president, here comes the transfer portal, get prepared. Think about that. 10 years ago, Will Muschamp was told by his president in Florida that the transfer portal was coming and it's going to be crazy. He's not wanting to get back into the head coaching game. He is comfortable at Georgia. If something happens, Schulman ends up leaving, he can be straight up defensive coordinator. You look at this staff and how if they have to replace somebody that maybe goes off to the NFL or whatnot, it's an easy fix for Kirby. But this is a Georgia through and through staff, and what they've been able to do when it comes to recruiting, what they've been able to do when it comes to, picking the right players from the portal, but also just not letting things drop off in Athens, guys. Like, that's the thing that stands out to me. It's like, you come off last season where you win that national championship against Alabama, you lose all of those players, those NFL stars. And one of them made news last night, Quay Walker, for something he shouldn't have done. But now you look at this team this year and you're like, wait a minute, these guys just reloaded again. Like, is this Alabama 2.0? That's exactly what you're seeing. So I think with the staff right now, I think they're set for a very long time. And Kirby Smart knows what he's doing. I give him a lot of credit.
Trey, what else were you struck by just in your weekend of coverage there, in conversations, press conferences, whatever it might be?
Yeah, that struck by, talked to a couple of TCU people off the record, talked about Texas A&M, how they've kind of taken the fall in the state, when it comes to the way things are perceived right now in College Station, with hiring Bobby Petrino, having DJ Durkin on that staff as well. I got a couple of laughs out of some TCU folks who will go unnamed about what's going on with Jimbo Fisher. And, I was talking to one high-ranking official, and I'll just say in the state of Texas, who told me that, if Jimbo Fisher, he don't get it done next year, he said they're going to write him a check. Like, if they come out and try to win 7-8 games next year, they're going to write him a check. Like, they have got to be in playoff contention when this expansion comes. And I think that's the big thing that we're looking at. Texas, Oklahoma joining early. You got the Big Ten that's getting their own guys in there with USC and UCLA. So a lot of it's been about transfer portal. A lot of it's been about NIL, that this is not what they expected it to be. But too bad you didn't have any rules set up in place. Well, now all you're doing is paying players to come there. So, it's been interesting to hear, people getting people's opinions on some of the schools that should be in playoff contention every year, that even with a 12-team playoff, that, maybe they get lucky, but it just doesn't feel like they're going to win national championship. And one of those schools that was talked about a lot, guys, was Texas A&M. So, I don't know if it's a lot of hate because TCU's in town and they don't like the Aggies, or it's Georgia and Kirby Smart and their fans. But it's just going to be very interesting to see what college football looks like. Don't forget, transfer portal closes. I think, if I'm not mistaken, January 19th, I think, is the date that it will close. So you're going to see a lot of teams over the next week try to shore up their rosters before that next one opens in the spring. So.
Trey Wallace with coverage at OutKick.com of tonight's national championship. He's about to head over to SoFi. Trey, thank you, man. We'll let you do that, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up with you tomorrow to recap and give thoughts on what you've observed post-game.
Guys, I really appreciate it. It's been good. OutKick's out here and doing a great job with coverage, guys, and everybody back home. And you guys continue to crush it. And let's wrap the college football season up strong. Thanks, boys.
Have fun, man. Trey. Talk to you soon.
Trey Wallace there. And, again, great coverage at OutKick through Trey. Check out the podcast with Trey as well, Trey Wallace podcast. He mentioned Will Muschamp, but not wanting to get back into coaching just yet. I would say he will whenever Witt, his son, decides on where he wants to play football.
Yeah, they could be a package deal. They could be hey, I'll be the head coach and I'll coach my son wherever we go. Yeah,
we called his game.
It's a very uncommon circumstance right now at Georgia that they are being led by a Dynamo head coach who played football for their school. That's not going to flirt with a lot of other jobs every offseason. And Georgia is going to obviously pay him what they feel he's worth, and that's the top level at all of college football. He's right behind Nick Saban right now, almost dead even with him, and that's what he's worth right now.
Yep.
Based on about to win a second national championship. So
they'll both get raises again.
Will Muschamp, to say that he's not ready to be a head coach, I don't know that he's getting a lot of interest right now is the biggest problem with that. He's going to be interested in moving on and being a head coach again at some point. He'll get that opportunity because Georgia is not going to stop recruiting every year. They had the number 1 overall pick a year ago in Trayvon Walker. They may have another number 1 overall pick in Jalen Carter on the interior defensive line this year. It's incredible the amount of talent they're turning out. The fact that you've got a recruiting base right there in your state that if you get the guys you want in the state of Georgia, you're going to be a national championship contender every year. It's a great spot if you're a Bulldogs fan right now. Enjoy it because, and also I would say enjoy it. Doesn't happen all the time. It may happen for a while, the way things are set up with the Bulldogs. And on the flip side with TCU, Hutton, I think they're set up great in the changing college football landscape to be a factor in that conference every year and be in a 12-team playoff
and it's
regularly.
Huge for the 12, the Big 12, to have TCU represent this and potentially win a title. And it's not Texas or Oklahoma that are even being mentioned in the conversation of potential teams that could do that right now. And Sonny Dykes, for all the discussion of Kirby Smart, and rightfully so with Kirby and his staff, I'm at fault here. I haven't given Sonny Dykes enough credit going into this game like we would if this was Saban or Ryan Day even, from what we saw last week. I'm curious to see how the TCU coaching staff approaches the game plan tonight, especially on offense, and if they can get after Stetson Bennett and rush the passer the way Ohio State was early in that football game. A couple of notes here. If Georgia wins tonight, they will tie the major college record with 29 wins over 2 seasons. 29-1 will be that record. 12 of those 29 wins came against ranked teams during this stretch, and 6 in the SEC title and playoff games for those victories. Crazy to think about the teams they've won against throughout this run and the dominance that they've had. Georgia, they are 32-1 their last 33 games. Only Miami, Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State, Florida State, and USC are the programs that have done that. And CBS goes on to point out 14 straight games over Power 5 schools, 44-5 in regular season SEC games. It is Alabama-like, and honestly, it's not even Alabama-like. It's now Georgia-like. It's now it's the bar.
I'm telling you, this is not changing. This is an infallible program right now. Now, they could guess wrong on quarterback one time. They could have a bad string of injuries and miss a playoff one year. But the way they're set up right now, there's no one that's close to catching them. In the SEC, Alabama's always going to be a factor. I think LSU's a team to watch. Tennessee's a team to watch with their offense if they continue to get better players. But Hutton, next year's odds to win the national championship. Let's go ahead and look ahead about what to look at next year.
Okay.
Based on very early Vegas odds, Georgia is plus 300, Ohio State plus 700. Stop me when you hear something out of line.
Okay.
Alabama is plus 700, same as Ohio State. Michigan plus 800. USC plus 1,200. Clemson plus 1,600. Texas plus 1,800. Tennessee plus 2,000. Tied with Florida State at plus 2,000 for ninth. And then LSU and Penn State, all at plus 2,000 as well. So Tennessee, Florida State, LSU, Penn State, right on the edge of basically ranked 7 through 11, tied for the odds. But what is out of whack here? It's Texas, plus 1,800. You want to talk about an important year? Steve Sarkisian is going to enter a very important year. They were disappointing this season. Quinn Ewers is a bigger prospect than Arch Manning was in terms of rating. Okay? Arch Manning is Arch Manning. He's got the lineage. He's got the family. He's got the bloodline. He's got the marketability. I get it. He's going to be a great player, I think. But if Arch Manning doesn't work out and win 11 games a year and compete for national championships, whose fault is it? They're not going to blame Arch Manning. They're going to blame Steve Sarkisian, who last time we saw him, the guy's cussing out of someone helping out the bowl game by holding him back before he runs out on the field. It's a big year for Sark. I'm just looking at that top 10, and based on what we saw this year, there's really only 2 teams you'd say, well, it's a little bit out of place. Texas, Florida State. But Florida State's got a great team coming back.
On the rise. Texas, though, the thing is the committee had Texas high with 2 losses and 3 losses on the season. They were game out of the Big 12 championship game if they just win at the end.
Yeah, I don't think it's all bad, and landing Arch Manning was a huge win.
Oh, it's incredible.
For Texas.
Because then you get the windfall of him with other recruits.
I'm just not sold so far. I'm not sold on their transition to the SEC, and that's going to be smooth. I'm not sold on what they got. In their biggest moment, they couldn't score against TCU in a game where they had a chance to beat TCU at home, and Quinn Ewers was big-time disappointing. Sarkisian's play calling was big-time disappointing in that one. In a home game, I'm just not sold.
Man, it's hard. It's hard not to put them in the conversation, though, with Manning.
Oh, they're going to have to be.
Because
my point is that they've set the bar now, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's high to begin with at Texas, but that bar is insanely high now when Arch Manning becomes a starting quarterback.
But in the world of the transfer portal, I feel pretty confident in Arch Manning selecting a school and sticking with the school. I realize that's crazy, but that's even more so in line with why, unless it's due to some crazy injury, it's hard for me seeing a Manning fail, right? Those guys win, and they lead.
When
they lead.
The one time where they may have been set up to fail, they held out their son Eli from going to the Chargers and got him to the Giants. I mean, they orchestrated the draft to where it was set up for success, and he won 2 Super Bowls because of that.
But that orchestrated that move with the Chargers, but to the Giants. And no, we're not trying to say the exact situation there, but you have an opportunity to pick, and they chose Sark. Take that in consideration, that he's the head coach when they landed Arch Manning. That also, to me, is a check mark in his category. But yeah, I mean, it's time to win. I mean, it's time to pick up and go, and especially with A&M down and with TCU playing the way they're playing in the state.
He looked like a crazy person before that bowl game.
He was awful.
I mean, I understand, like in the heat of the moment on a football field with players or another coach, like, you're going to have heated words. That was 0 to a million out of nowhere at some kid who's just got a headset on trying to make sure they run out at just the right time for the confetti to hit. at the bowl game you're playing in. That was a weird, bad look for Sarkisian, and Texas fans want to downplay it. It's not some fireable offense or some national issue, and it has nothing to do with his curse words either, which when I tweeted about this, people are like, oh, you don't think other coaches
the reaction.
cuss? It's not about cussing.
0 to 100.
Most every coach cusses. I'm talking about you don't do that to some staffer right before you run out for a game. It's just very unleader-like to snap to that level in that moment. It's just weird.
And how many games has he been a part of where you have to hold in the tunnel until it's time to go?
Yeah, I mean,
just to be that amped up in that moment, to be calm and then just all in, all at it, like you're getting hyped up for a UFC
yeah, I mean,
fight.
Should the guy be like, keep their hand on him? Maybe not, but I mean, there's a way to act annoyed. Like, hey, I got it. You don't have to, hold me back. You can say something. You don't just go, prison justice on him.
Oh, yeah.
In his face right before you run out of the tunnel.
Scared straight.
It was a little bit of Matt Foley for Chris Farley's character with this kid. It was nuts.
Oh, coming up also crazy. I'm sure some of our predictions across the AFC and NFC. We'll take a look at our preseason predictions versus the current playoff field for the NFL.
I don't remember a single one, so this is going to be a refresher for me. I don't know what I picked for anything. We'll see how good we do.
Well, we'll find out next. That's coming up on OutKick 360.
Back to the Christian thing in the broad picture. Your father, how many kids, if you don't mind saying, do you have several kids? One kid?
Seven children.
You have 7 children, so you're a big family man. I did not know that.
Yes.
How many sons? Because this is what I kind of want to dig into.
I have 5 sons.
5 sons, perfect. As a Christian man, how do you feel, like, what is your job when it comes to raising young men in modern America?
Number one, to teach my boys to know and love Jesus. That would be their primary identity in life. To everything else being completely secondary to that. That is number one. Number 2 would be to make them capable men, right? To make them well-rounded, to make them able to handle themselves, to make them strong physically, able to fight, able to shoot, able to protect their future, their own families. A great quote, Robert Heinlein, and I'm going to butcher it, but I will attempt it anyways. He basically says that a man should be able to plan an invasion, change a diaper, cook a meal, build a house, he just goes down this list of you should be able to do all these things as a man. And then at the very end, he says specialization is for insects. And I did not always think that. All right. I mean, there was times in my life where I didn't care about learning how to weld or be mechanically inclined or any of these other things. I was like, oh, I just want to be a commando. I just want to go and shoot and do hard stuff. And that was a mistake. I mean, I think I've said this before I did 2 ship deployments, 2 ARG deployments as a young frogman. And honestly, I was arrogant at the time. And man, here you're on a ship, which was kind of miserable. And I had a bad attitude about it instead of, because I'm like, I should be on land training more. And instead of going, okay, this is where I'm at. Yeah, I don't have to like it, but there's all these master machinists and welders and guys that are, in charge of charts and navigation, to navigate across the globe. And here I could have, if I would have showed just a little bit of interest, those guys would have been happy to be like, oh yeah, I'll teach you how to weld. I'll teach you how to run a lathe, all these things that now I'm like, man, I want to learn all that stuff. I want to be able to do everything. And some of that's reinforced now. Kind of, we live out on a little bit of a farm, so you do need to be able to, when stuff breaks, you need to be able to fix it yourself, and so there's a lot of value in that. So I want, number one, I want my boys to know and love Jesus, and then number 2, to be capable. It's actually, so we do a program called Father-Son Ministry, where it's gone through different iterations. Currently, the way we run it is you show up, we pray, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we start training. And that was very deliberate right there, that, hey, we honor God first, and we honor our nation, and then we start to train. Most of the time we do jiu-jitsu. So that's been just super cool having the boys go from it just looking clownish, them rolling around to, man, they're, some of those boys, I will actually, break a sweat rolling with them now. And they will absolutely catch some guys with triangles and arm bar. Like, they're actually learning jiu-jitsu.
Chad, I don't know if I'm looking forward to this segment or not. I am looking forward to our next guest. Brad Gaines will be with us in about 10 minutes.
Our little pre-interview talk has already got me excited about talking with Brad.
Yeah. So, and great news, by the way, with Damar Hamlin, who has been released of the UC Medical Center hospital on his way to Buffalo, and all signs pointing to a miraculous recovery. Where a week ago tonight, we weren't saying the same thing when we came in on Tuesday morning. We were hoping for the best, but everyone expecting the worst based on what everyone saw. And now we're on to the playoffs a week later, and that's the focus, which is great. My focus was wrong, Chad, the AFC South.
Were you focused when you made these picks?
I thought I was. So here are my preseason predictions for the NFL playoffs, okay?
We were both focused and sober when we made these selections.
Correct.
We can confirm that was the case.
AFC division winners: Baltimore, Buffalo, LA, and Tennessee. And the wild card: Bengals, Colts, and Chiefs. Now, swing and a miss on the Colts by far throughout the entire season. The Titans fall off, losing 7 straight games.
They were 7-3 at one point, so that's not a horrible pick.
And Baltimore not winning the division because Lamar Jackson missed, the last 6 games, I believe. I would flip-flop the Bengals and Ravens in a heartbeat right now and tell you I think Cincinnati's a far better team. But Kansas City getting the 1 seed, I bought into the hype of the Chargers, and it's flip-flop for me based on the results versus predictions in the AFC.
Not too bad, though.
Yeah, but the Colts is a huge miss because I didn't trust them to go through Jonathan Taylor to begin with.
Yeah, not bad. Are we going with your NFC picks next? Okay, Hutton's NFC picks.
So Philadelphia out of the NFC East, to me, I was buying into the investment at wide receiver. Had Green Bay winning, followed by
you chose wisely.
Rams winning their division, and the Saints. Look at those. Look at that 4-pack of teams. I mean, it's just misery.
I don't think I'm going to like my NFC picks either.
It looks like I was predicting teams that were going to be without a coach or without a quarterback.
Let's pick the biggest downers, the Debbie Downers of 2022, and then Hutton went through those teams.
Yeah. So give Tampa and Philly, and I thought Vikings could make a playoff push. I was not expecting them to run away with their division, and no one's really predicting them to win this weekend.
You still got 4 of the 7 playoff teams right, so that's not too bad in the NFC.
But the division, steering the division was not good for me in the NFC. No, Chad, I don't.
Not great.
Who did you have out of the AFC?
Let's look at it. AFC picks. Flip-flop Bengals, Ravens, but not bad. Bills, we all nailed on that one. Chiefs, I've never been a Chargers believer. Now, that bit me. Not putting them as a wild card team, but Chiefs win the division. We all swung and missed on the Titans winning the South. And Hutton and I, too, would regrettably pick the Colts to be in the playoffs. And the Raiders, not good. Not a good pick with the Raiders. Let's look at my NFC picks. I'm hoping I did better. Yeah, kind of.
San Fran.
I got 3 of the 4 division winners right, other than the Packers.
You got 5 teams in.
2 of the 3, 5 of the 7. Not bad. I'll take that. If every year you told me I could pick 5 of the 7 playoff teams going into a conference, then, well, it's not bad at all.
And it was awful considering you would have had all but 1 if Green Bay just wins that game last
This
night.
does refresh my memory. I do believe, and I still have this as my pick right now, I think I picked Bills over 49ers for the Super Bowl this year. And I think that would still be my pick. So I'm staying strong with my Super Bowl pick.
I had Bills and Rams. So it's Buffalo or bust for me. Although I would change it right now. Maybe we can get to that later if you want. But I would change my Super Bowl pick.
I'd say the biggest,
even though everything is pointing in Buffalo's favor, including the country and America's team now resides in Buffalo for the postseason.
But still, I'd say the biggest mulligan for both of us, probably the same team, the Colts, being a wild card team.
Yes.
That's the highest draft pick that we have on our board. They're picking 4th overall, and we both had them in the playoffs. So that's not ideal.
And none of us would have
None of us had the Bears. The other 3 teams, none of us had the Bears, the Texans, and who am I leaving out? That's another top 3 pick, the top 3 pick.
Oh, the
Colts are picking 4th. Bears 1, Texans
Seahawks.
2.
The Seahawks are 5th, though, I think.
Yeah.
Now, after yesterday's result. But it would have been Denver. It's actually Denver's pick. I was going to say.
There it is, Arizona.
I was going to say none of us had Denver in that. And they were the hot team to make a push out of that division.
Thank you, Tyler. Yes. Bears 1, Texans 2, Arizona 3, Indy 4, Seattle 5. None of us had any of the other top 5 picks.
Thank goodness.
But we both had the Colts.
Cliff Kingsbury out in Arizona.
Not great.
Steve Keim as well. And you have Michael Bidwell saying they're going to have a vast search. And the first name I saw was
far and wide.
Vance Joseph is who they want to speak with.
Just hire Bill O'Brien and be done
Adrian
with
Wilson in their front office right now, I think, is a good candidate for GM. They may have their answer right there.
I'll tell you, it'd be a great candidate. Titans offensive coordinator Todd Downing.
Brad Gaines joins us in studio next.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point it felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Just like that, the final hour is here, Monday edition. We are getting you ready for tonight's national championship matchup, Georgia-TCU. We'll give some predictions, some thoughts, and big takes going into the game tonight for the matchup. Looking forward to that. More NFL discussion as well, where the storyline for the last week has been with Damar Hamlin, and he is headed back to Buffalo. He's been released from the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. And he says, headed home to Buffalo today with a lot of love on my heart. Watching the world come together around me on Sunday was truly an amazing feeling. And it was a remarkable and fast recovery, considering, Chad, last week felt like 2 or 3 weeks combined as you waited on information to slowly come out of this, where you have to hurry up and wait, but you really don't want to. You're trying not to speculate, but it's hard not to after 3 days, where you're trying to get any little inkling of information on how things are going.
And I'll just speak for me personally. I mean, I went from watching that horrible scene on the field to Googling if anyone had ever died during an NFL game, and, you know, discovering the player for the Lions back in the early 70s, to thinking that when we weren't getting an update, it must mean awful news throughout the next 48 hours, to being very much encouraged by the news from the doctors this past Thursday, to everything over the weekend, Hutton, to now being discharged. I mean, prayers were answered in this deal. There's no other way to say it. And because it was from the darkest thoughts of what we were witnessing live on TV to no news, which led us to some dark thoughts, to encouraging news, actual news, and now he's leaving the hospital. It's awesome.
So many different perspectives on this, and one of them right here in our own backyard of Nashville, Tennessee, with Brad Gaines, former Vanderbilt running back. And if you haven't seen the SEC Network and ESPN special on Chucky Mullins, make sure you find that. Chucky Mullins, who I believe passed away 32 years ago, maybe 32 and a half years ago.
1991, yeah.
And in 1989, he was paralyzed from the neck down while making a hit on our guest in studio, Brad Gaines, who joins us. Thank you for the time. Good to see you. And welcome to the Six of Peabody studio.
Good to see you guys. Hey, this facility is fabulous. It really is. What a neat place to do this show from.
It's a full city block.
Yes,
Brad,
it is.
Around here. If you go outside and everything, it's large.
That's
so
right.
We like it.
Your perspective is one that we thought of last week because T. Higgins was certainly a part of this story. Bart Scott saying things about how the hit or should or should not have come about, and there's no blame there whatsoever. But from your perspective, Brad, and just knowing the emotions that go through it from what you went through, what came to mind for you initially when you saw all this going down in Cincinnati?
Immediately, my thoughts obviously go to Damar, but they immediately then go to T, because look, I was in that spot, that exact spot, and if you've never been there, you cannot fathom what that's like. And so I knew what's going through this guy's mind. It is so until you have those results, as you say, which now in the age of social media, when this happened to me, the other night I knew they could not play that game and to continue the game. Look, the NFL is a gigantic business monster, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And so there are a lot of things that they have to think about. Advertisers, the whole, it's about money. So did they probably want to get that game started? Of course. They probably did. However, after a while, and you see what this is, there is absolutely no way that those players would have played. Wasn't going to happen. I mean, you can't ask a coach to now think about, here's what I game plan on third and when it's 3rd and 5 and on the 40 going in, and you're not thinking about that. The players are not thinking about that. I promise you. When that happened with me, of course, that's so long ago, and you didn't have social media, and so we finished the game. However, they life-flighted him out of Oxford, Mississippi to Memphis, and so you didn't know. It wasn't the age of where you expect quick response and you get instant information.
And now you'd have gotten an update on the sideline from someone behind you in the stands that's reading their phone.
So for me, it was until after the game when the press is in there and I'm asking, hey, does anybody know what the situation is with the fella, from Ole Miss? Of course, I didn't know it was Chucky at the time.
Right.
So, but for T. Higgins and a couple of guys that I'd played with, Chris Donnelly, who ended up playing at Alabama, I think was roommates with Dabo, and I called it and said, hey, have Dabo call me. I want to get T's number. I want to reach out to him. I've been there. I know what he's going through. And so for the next 3 or 4 days, I'm telling you, it's a lonely spot. It's a lonely spot. It doesn't matter what, his head coach can talk to him or his parents can talk to him. It doesn't matter because, I know what it's like.
Well, and it's also, you were a fullback at Vandy, so it's a violent sport to begin with, but you're playing a violent position. I mean, your whole goal is to dislodge humans, right? To move people around, to hit them as hard as you can. And I'm watching that play, and it was immediate. I know it takes a certain mindset to play the game and to psych yourself up to, I'm going to knock this guy over to get extra yards. But the moment everyone knew something was very wrong,
Sure.
How quick did it change with you when you knew okay, I'm Brad Gaines, the guy trying to knock you over to get extra yardage, to, hey, I'm a human out here and something's not right?
Well, for me, Chad, it was a third down play, and if you go back and look at the film, look at the video, as I start to catch the ball, I'm going to catch it and back into the end zone. It's like on the 2 or 3 yard line, back into the end zone for a touchdown. And as soon as the ball gets there, bang! I mean, a great hit. And if you keep following the video, I mean, I get up and I'm catching my breath. He did his job. Chucky Mullins did his job. Came across from the other hash mark safety, made the play, dislodged the ball, and just had a great play. However, he immediately went down. And when you say, look, Billy Brewer said, look, I couldn't go out on that field, just like in the video. And he says, and Leroy Mullins, who was the trainer there, told me, he said, we thought he was going to die on that field. And then the surgeons at the hospital had told me, look, when we got in to do surgery at the hospital, his neck, it looked as if somebody had dropped a grenade in it. So, I mean, it's tough. And the game is so fast and players are so big and it's so violent that unfortunately there will be more injuries. It's going to happen. It's going to happen every year. And so that's just one of the things that happens.
Brad, how long did it take, and I know you never fully get over this, before you felt like, you know what, it's not my fault. Was there something that you had to hear in order to really feel that way? Because you were never you've admitted mentally you weren't the same player after this play.
No, and it made me not love the game. And that was not me. Hey, at the time, I've got Greg playing at Seattle, Chris is playing at Miami, and I know, hey, that's where
your brothers.
That's
where I'm. Yeah.
That's where I'm going. Yeah. I know what my next step is to play at the next level, and then after that, it's amazing because look, nothing like that has ever happened to me. I don't even think I had ever buried anybody, much less something happened, and it's an emotion that you can't control. Look, I when Coach Brown called me the other night, immediately after that happened, and he said, "Hey, Brad, I just thought of you." And so you never lose that. I do what I do when I go to the grave because that's what I do. This year when I win, it's 5 degrees down there, but, man, that's what I do, and I will continue to do that. So do you ever get over it? I mean, that's for everybody's going to react differently to different situations. You're going to respond differently than I would. Chad's going to respond differently than you would. I mean, it's just different. This is just how I react. So, I don't that's just what I do.
We've seen the SEC Network, ESPN movie, the film. We've read the story, so we know about it.
Sure.
But tell everyone that doesn't know the story about your annual practice of visiting his grave.
Look, I visit his grave in 3 times a year. I go May the 6th, the anniversary of when he died. I go the 28th, the anniversary of the accident. And then I go Christmas Day. And I've done it for, I've made that trip several hundred times now. So that's just what I do. And anything, man, it helps me. It helps me. It gives me time to visit with him, to reflect, and it's an all-day drive, and it's more therapeutic for me than anything.
Brad Gaines in studio with us. How about the moment yesterday with the kickoff return for a touchdown?
Isn't that amazing?
Buffalo returns to play.
I mean, that just tells you. And look, I'm not getting kooky or hooky or anything like this, but I do believe that the Lord puts people in positions to where they can make an effect. I think that I was chosen to be in that spot. I think things like that happen. I mean, the opening kickoff for him to run that back. I mean, right? I mean, that doesn't happen.
I don't know how you kept playing.
It's
you know, like in that moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Were you in the moment? Were you hopeful the rest of the game that there was a better outcome than maybe you thought deep down it was, and that kind of kept you going? I'm saying
for me,
For
me, I mean, it was like. I think I had a pretty...
Because you're right now, it'd be crazy to keep playing. You knew when it happened with Damar Hamlin,
but you didn't
they
know
weren't going to play.
And so, like I said, it was after the game when I'm meeting with reporters that I have to ask somebody how. So ironically, the coach that recruited Chucky at Ole Miss, Ron Case, had came to Watson hired him that year, and so that next day he's telling me all about him, and he tells me his story. And that, and as you come to find out, it is the epitome of myself. I have this athletic lineage in my family, and we've all done well athletically. And I could have went to a lot of schools, and you have this guy who comes from nothing, doesn't have anything. I come from a strong familial background. He doesn't know his dad. His mom's died when he was 10 or 11, and he begged for a scholarship. So it was kind of that, you know, that have and have not thing. This side of the track, this side of the track. Although I didn't come from money, but I came from a strong family unit that, you know, and it was one of those things. So Coach Case tells me about his story, and it just resonated. And, you know, we ended up being, you know, great friends through this.
Were you able to talk with T. Higgins?
Have not yet.
Okay.
But I will. Yeah, look, you know, and it's right now he's getting so many requests, and look, it's good for him to, you know, the best thing for T is
the result.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I can promise you he's sleeping a whole lot better now.
But when we heard the Bart Scott comments,
well,
you know,
look, I had to think about that, you know, and I thought he can't be that knucklehead to say something like that, right? I mean, he's a player.
The type of player he was,
and he was a linebacker. That was a hard-hitting linebacker.
And then I'm thinking, you know, are they trying to have a pro and con? You know, kind of like Shannon Sharp and
Skip.
What's his Skip? And who's a Vanderbilt grad?
Yeah.
But so I said, he can't, you know, because now look, Bart's public enemy number one the next day, right?
By former players, current players.
Oh gosh,
not just us.
So
right?
You know, it was kind of puzzling that he said that. You have to think, did he really mean that? Did he really? I don't know. I mean, has he made a statement on that? Do y'all know?
No, he just kind of said it, and there were no apologies. Kind of went away. I haven't seen him back on, you know, ESPN since then.
Well,
but
look, those
he
are
may
some
be going on there. Who knows?
That can be, you know, I don't want to say a career killer, but things like that. I mean, they matter when you involve the public in the sentiment of the public. Look, 2 years ago, I mean, would they be? They would probably be hating you if you just tried to get up there and say a prayer. And then Orlovsky says a prayer, and Ryan Clark, the fantastic job that he did. Hey, you know what? Who do you turn to when it's tough, right?
This has certainly changed the discussion about prayer.
Oh, my goodness.
In a big way with a lot of major media outlets that I've seen. I completely agree with you on that. It's been different since this moment.
How long? When was it? I mean, if Tebow did it 10 years ago, he gets vilified for it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's here. It's just doesn't make sense. But
and there's no way that Orlovsky could have planned that. Now, it was the spur of the moment aspect that allowed him to do it. Right, like on live television, and that's not on a rundown somewhere.
But look, it's like, hey, ABC would have gotten blasted if they would have cut to a commercial.
Yes,
and honestly, I think probably a producer would have discouraged him against it had he, as you said, Hutton, ran it by someone.
No
I think he did in the moment, and people loved it.
No doubt.
And everyone on set with him, bowed their head and prayed
Yes.
with him. So I think all of that helped the discussion around it. Hey, for those watching that may be a little bit confused, Brad, you got the Vanderbilt visor on, and you got the Go Big Blue shirt on.
Yeah.
But that's because your daughter, Riley, is just finished up a very successful swimming career at Kentucky. I know is doing very well.
She has. I think she ended up being a 10, 12-time All-American, and last year I think she broke a couple of SEC records, and she's kind of been in the news for some other stuff here lately. But as a father,
she's been on the OutKick network. In fact,
she has.
Yeah.
She's been on with Clay several times.
Been on with Tommy Lahren too.
Yes, and she's in D.C. She was at Trump's this weekend, and she's in D.C. today. So, I mean, look, this is America, and everybody has an opinion. That's if you lived in Iraq or Iran, you couldn't say these things. So, she has a platform, and she has an opinion. As a father, I'm tremendously proud of her. And look, politically, and we discussed this earlier, doesn't matter how you look at it politically. The whole thing is what's fair is fair, and it's not fair to have a biological male compete against women. Well, look, somebody that has gotten tremendously close to Riley is Caitlyn Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah,
and he has been fantastic. And here's a guy. Here Caitlyn is a tremendous support of, look, this is not fair. And you're talking about the guy that, I guess we were really, really young kids, but here's the guy that is totally All-American, super good looking, could have any girl in Hollywood.
Greatest athlete of 1972.
Greatest athlete in the world. I mean, look, that's what it is, period. So it's not right and it's not fair,
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. It's weird that it's even an issue. I feel like it's not, I don't know. It's just, of course, what's fair is fair when it comes to
You had the
that.
judge in West Virginia.
It's common sense.
I believe there were 16 or 17 states now that have some sort of policy in place now, which is great.
Right.
But, I mean, by and large, I think the majority of Americans agree with what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we separate boys and girls in sports at a very young age, like past T-ball.
Sure.
They start and there's a reason for that, because physically, boys and girls are different. So, of course, men and women are going to be different as they age and become young adults.
Well, look,
this is not rocket science that we're talking about
this
here.
guy that swam against Riley, legitimately 6'4", and arms that will reach from here to here, and was ranked in the 400, 500s in the male, and so he goes over, and he probably, if he really tried, could have broken like Katie Ledecky's records, and she's arguably the greatest female swimmer in the history of swimming, right? I mean, and so that just doesn't make that. That's just, there's nothing right about it. And look, I don't want to hear all about, well, it's not fair and the mental aspect. And come on now. What he did was he took All-American status from two girls who swam their whole life to do these things. And that's what's selfish. So there you go.
We agree.
Well, your daughter's doing well, so congrats on that. I know you're a proud dad.
I am.
She moving to D.C. soon?
I don't know. Hope not. Hope not.
She goes from swimming in a pool to swimming in a swamp.
Yeah, she's in
the chlorine in those pools are a lot more clean than that D.C.
She's swimming
situation.
In Shrek's pool, right?
Yeah.
What are you up to nowadays, Brad?
I'm been in healthcare, and so I enjoy that.
I want to make sure those notes aren't like secret codes or something you've got pinned to your collar there.
Well, I have to make notes.
All right.
I have to make notes now. So
like a coach with a play sheet.
I thought you were about to call some plays.
Man, how in the world did you? I tell my kids, how did you get in Vanderbilt? So,
I've got people asking me how I got in the middle, so it's okay.
Well, they say, "What'd you get your degree in?" And I have a PE degree, okay. And so, but I say, I say it's an engineering degree, physical
Do
engineering.
they still have PE at
No.
Vandy?
And I'm going to tell you a little quick story. So, and I'm not proud of this, but me and Chris.
Statute of limitations is up if this is some sort of NCAA violation, by the way. So it's fine. Say whatever you want.
No, so Chris comes back. He's playing somewhere, and he comes back to graduate, and we are like the only two people in the university that are left in the PE program for like 2 years. And so as soon as we get out, they cut it all out.
You could be professor emeritus.
So there's not a PE program.
The grandfather clause for the physical education degree at Vanderbilt.
I remember for a while, I think PE became human and organizational development.
That's
because
what it
I remember
was.
talking to another Vandy grad, and like if you notice, most every athlete at Vandy, it's kind of like they're undecided, the undeclared major. It's human and organizational development, which no one even really knows what that means. It's like human resources, I guess.
Was this the Vandy's version of Swahili?
But I tell
Carolina?
them, I say, hey, you look on that diploma. It says Vanderbilt University. Doesn't matter that most of my classes were at Peabody. Doesn't matter. And I tell, hey, I graduated from an institution of higher learning.
Hey,
So-
man, and hey, you give us an education on Chucky Mullins and the impact of all of this. So, I mean, you mentioned things happen for a reason, and you're put in a certain spot. I mean, we're joking about the PE thing.
Sure.
But
Sure.
hearing your story and seeing the piece and learning about Chucky Mullins, we're sitting here thinking, man, this could have been a similar situation, and it's not. With Hamlin.
Without
and we're
a
very
doubt.
grateful
Without
for
a
that.
doubt. And first, look, my relationship with the people at Ole Miss is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, they have been so good to me. And, I've developed relationships. Of course, me and Billy Brewer got to be super close. And then after him, Coach Tuberville. And then, of course, I knew Coach Cutt from when he was in Knoxville and recruiting, different things like that. And then Coach O and I got to be good buddies. And then when Houston came there, me and Houston we've traveled together. It's things like that, and the players and the fans, and it meant something to them. Look, you're talking about Mississippi, which has that stigma of the whole race theory behind it, right? And what they did for him and to raise the money. Look, if this happened today, when you saw the money that Damar raised, oh my gosh, and they raised $1 million in a weekend
without a GoFundMe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're passing around KFC buckets and stuff like that. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, you say Chucky, and they know who you're talking about, right?
Sure.
So
SEC fans do for sure.
I
College
mean,
football
look,
fans.
the SEC is, you can argue however you want, but it is the absolute best league, best run league.
Yes.
And that's why, look, if Clemson was in our league, they would lose 3 or 4 or 5 games every year. It just would. And if the Pac-10 or Pac-12 or whatever it's called now, they would be, Vanderbilt might have a chance, right? So
Well, just ask Florida.
Hey.
Vanderbilt has a chance now.
That's right.
Prayers are answered all the time, Brad. You
This
never
is
know.
right. This is
Vandy
true.
may compete for a title in football after
Look,
all.
hey,
thanks for coming in studio with us. We really appreciate
Glad to be
this.
here, man.
Yep.
Anytime, and you guys do a fantastic show. I listen to you every day, and
Thank you, sir.
you have a great following.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, man. Great perspective there from Brad Gaines. Coming up, Chad, let's stay with the SEC theme and preview tonight's
Let's
title
do it.
game with some big thoughts on Georgia TCU. That's next on OutKick 360.
Back to the Christian thing in the broad picture. Your father, how many kids? If you don't mind saying, do you have several kids? One kid?
Seven children.
You have 7 children, so you're a big family man. I did not know that.
Yes.
How many sons? Because this is what I kind of want to dig into.
I have 5 sons.
5 sons, perfect. As a Christian man, how do you feel? Like, what is your job when it comes to raising young men in modern America?
Number one, to teach my boys to know and love Jesus, that would be their primary identity in life. To everything else being completely secondary to that. That is number one. Number two would be to make them capable men, right? To make them well-rounded, to make them, able to handle themselves, to make them strong physically, able to fight, able to shoot, able to protect their future, their own families. A great quote, Robert Heinlein, and I'm going to butcher it, but I will attempt it anyways. He basically says that a man should be able to plan an invasion, change a diaper, cook a meal, build a house. He just goes down this list of you should be able to do all these things as a man. And then at the very end, he says specialization is for insects. And I did not always think that. All right. I mean, there was times in my life where I didn't care about learning how to weld or be mechanically inclined or any of these other things. I was like, oh, I just want to be a commando. I just want to go and shoot and do hard stuff. And that was a mistake. I mean, I think I've said this before on, I did 2 ship deployments, 2 ARG deployments as a young frogman. And honestly, I was arrogant at the time. And man, here you're on a ship, which was kind of miserable. And I had a bad attitude about it instead of, because I'm like, I should be on land training more. And instead of going, okay, this is where I'm at. Yeah, I don't have to like it, but there's all these master machinists and welders and guys that are, in charge of charts and navigation, to navigate across the globe. And here I could have, if I would have showed just a little bit of interest, those guys would have been happy to be like, oh yeah, I'll teach you how to weld. I'll teach you how to run a lathe, all these things that now I'm like, man, I want to learn all that stuff. I want to be able to do everything. And some of that's reinforced now. Kind of, we live out on a little bit of a farm, so you do need to be able to, when stuff breaks, you need to be able to fix it yourself, and so there's a lot of value in that. So I want, number one, I want my boys to know and love Jesus, and then number two, to be capable. It's actually, so we do a program called Father-Son Ministry, where it's gone through different iterations. Currently, the way we run it is you show up, we pray, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we start training. And that was very deliberate right there, that, hey, we honor God first, then we honor our nation, and then we start to train. Most of the time we do jiu-jitsu. So that's been just super cool, having the boys go from it just looking clownish, them rolling around, to, man, they're, some of those boys, I will actually, break a sweat rolling with them now, and they will absolutely catch some guys with triangles and arm bar. They're actually learning jiu-jitsu.
OutKick 360 rolls on. Our thanks to Brad Gaines for joining us in studio. Also, Amy Dash and Trey Wallace, who's got you covered for OutKick with tonight's national championship game between Georgia and TCU. Black Monday across the NFL. Cliff Kingsbury is out as the head coach. And for the Arizona Cardinals, Steve Keim, their general manager, also out. Michael Bidwell said he prefers to hire the GM first, then the head coach. But he also added that, and he may have been asked directly, but he says that Kyler Murray will have input on the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. You don't hear that often in a coaching search. Sometimes you just try to pair the style. And if you do want them to meet, you have them meet just prior to the announcement that the new head coach is coming in. But the pitch is Kyler Murray with the contract that was handed out to him this past offseason. Todd Downing has been fired by the Tennessee Titans. Yes, believe it or not, they are parting ways with offensive coordinator Todd Downing, along with offensive line coach Keith Carter and Anthony Midget, the secondary coach. This is a step in the right direction for this offense, regardless of where they're headed. We had seen enough evidence from this Titans offense, when healthy and when not, that enough was enough with running it back again with the same offensive system. Of course, Downing had the DUI right after his grand performance, maybe of the last 2 years, honestly, at Green Bay this past season on Thursday Night Football. And Chad, they've decided now, literally hours after Vrabel held the presser and said, we're all responsible for our actions, and he's going to talk to the coaching staff about how to handle moving forward a DUI situation. Hours after he says this, Downing's out. And they also have Tim Kelly still there, part of the staff. Tim Kelly's former offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans, was the passing game coordinator for the Titans. And it was someone that they had requested to reach out to and possibly interview whenever they ended up hiring Todd Downing. And Kelly seems to be a logical fit that would go in line with what Vrabel wants to do, and Vrabel knows him from Houston.
Do you think Bill O'Brien, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, would make more sense with the Titans or with the Patriots?
Patriots, given his background with Mac Jones.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm trying to think about what would his preference be.
Probably New England. Bill Belichick said today he's coming back for his 23rd season. I didn't know that there was any speculation he wasn't. But if you're Bill O'Brien, you could, Josh McDaniels isn't there anymore, at least not this offseason. So you could set yourself up to have an opportunity at that job.
Yeah, that's going to be a hot name. I think that Bill O'Brien's going to get some looks at head coaching jobs. But if not, the Titans would be foolish not to approach him about being offensive coordinator. A lot of talk about Cliff Kingsbury with the Titans or other openings. I think personally with the Titans it makes no sense. His background is in the air raid, and I didn't, quite frankly, see a lot of organization with their offense when he was there. It looked like, and maybe some of this is Kyler Murray with some of his deficiencies, but it looked like an offense where the guy backs up 7 steps and runs around like crazy and occasionally hits a crossing pattern during the game. I wasn't that impressed with their offense or his offensive ingenuity and organization there. It certainly wouldn't make sense where the Titans are right now roster-wise. So I don't like that for the Titans. Bill O'Brien would make some sense. And Hutton, do we like let's do the year-end locker clean-out press conference and not announce any changes and then immediately announce the changes after so you don't have to take questions about the changes? It works out great for the organization, but he knew this when he met with the media today.
Yeah.
This may have already been done by then.
I don't know if it was
and
that
if not,
early
just
on.
Immediately after,
Because
but he knew what he was doing.
They had the player exit interviews and then clearly the staff exit interviews. But yeah, you would have known you were making this change.
Yeah.
The Monday after you lose on Saturday night in Jacksonville and you lose 7 straight and you have your first losing season, you know what changes are in store if you're doing it on day number 1. So, yeah. And by the way, Vrabel was very loyal to Downing throughout the season. When he was asked about even the problems with the offense, and the fans here have been calling for his job for more than a year. He made the logical choice, though. If you're going to say that John Robinson shouldn't be around for the rebuild of a roster because organizationally you don't trust him, and that's what essentially ownership said. I don't know how you can also not look at the offense and the play calling and the creativity or lack thereof, even from week one on, and just the average points scored. The fact that they only scored 3 offensive touchdowns in the fourth quarter all season, and say, you know what, moving forward as we begin to retool and rebuild this, Todd Downing's the offensive coordinator. Couldn't do it. So with or without the DUI, the results on the field, to me, were not warranting him returning in that position.
Yeah, it was a tough year for Todd Downing. No doubt about it. And that's the ethos of Mike Vrabel as a coach, and what he wants is not a lot of finger pointing. So it would make sense that he would do everything within his power to deflect away from blaming one person. So you're right. He was loyal, said good things about Todd Downing. I think all that's in an effort to try to point the finger either at himself or not, to make sure the blame isn't focused in one spot with his team. But what he showed was, for all the people that say, well, he's too loyal for his own good, he made the necessary steps to improve this team and this organization. That's a good thing for the Titans organization, that Mike Vrabel is willing to make the difficult decision, even with his friends in the business that he's worked with. And he clearly, I believe, made the right call with getting rid of Todd Downing and now let's go in a different direction if you're Mike Vrabel with the offense.
And now also, just to point out too, I mean, with the DUI and what we've seen in what the NFL's done in the past, if you bring him back, he's on suspension for a month or a little bit longer than that. So a quarter of your season right there is when you're going to have to go, if it would have happened this year, and it wouldn't because they let the legal process play out, but it would have been Tim Kelly calling plays. Again, I think that makes the logical choice. And if you're bringing him back, you have to plan for a possible suspension from the league, because we have seen general managers, we have seen owners, coaches who have been suspended for about 4 to 6 weeks, give or take the situation. So that was also part of this, too, that made it much easier.
And also, we talked about how Mike Vrabel very much is not a let's not roll one person under the bus and blame anyone else type guy. There are times where his frustration, you can hear some honesty and truth behind what he's saying. Today, during his press conference, I heard where he was asked about the injuries and this just unprecedented rash of injuries the last 2 years for the Titans. And you could tell he was getting chippy and frustrated when he's talking about it. And he's saying, I don't know what to do about concussions and MCLs and ACLs that happen in games. But he did go on to say, and he talked at length about it, which is not like him. He said soft tissue injuries that take place when you are a repeat offender is how he phrased it. When you're a repeat offender with soft tissue injuries, and he named David Long Jr. and Christian Fulton, he said, well, Kevin Byard has never pulled a hamstring. So, you play fast with quick twitch in this league. You got to learn how to get yourself ready
and how you practice
to do that, and how you practice and prepare in the offseason to make sure you don't have injuries like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was very well said, but a little glimpse at honesty to the media from Mike Vrabel, which you don't get a lot, quite frankly, from what he's clearly thinking. But that was a brief moment of honesty on the injury situation. And I agree with him. People that want to talk about injuries in any sport, it's bad luck unless it's involving muscle pulls for the most part. I think that's what if it's like a form situation where you're not tackling properly and you're throwing shoulders out and things with technique, but most of the time, if it's a ligament in a knee or something like that, it's probably bad luck. But you got to look into everything right now if you're a team like the Titans after this season, after this 7-game losing streak.
Big changes.
To end the year.
Big changes coming to the number 1 seed from last year, and likely both of them from what we saw with the Rams as well. Hit us up with your thoughts at OutKick 360. Coming up, we will preview tonight's national title game. Georgia TCU will give our predictions. Also take a look at the comparison roster-wise and what we'll see on the field tonight. That's next on OutKick 360.
Man, just getting into the craziness. We've got the college football playoff championship game coming up on Monday. But looking back, your opinion, the semifinal Saturday was just so wild, and getting to watch these games and coming down to the wire and the back and forth. Let's start off with Michigan TCU. You got Max Duggan and the way that he played, Jim Harbaugh and his squad. It just seemed like they kind of laxed out there in the middle, and TCU took advantage. And what were your takeaways of how TCU is now playing for a national championship?
I was pretty stunned that it happened and pretty stunned by the way it happened. So I guess going in, if you were to tell me an upset's going to happen, not the craziest thing in the world. I didn't expect it, but it's not a wild concept that a 9-point favorite or underdog can win a game. When you start to see it play out and you realize Michigan has these weapons that have gotten them to where they are, and they are electing not to use those weapons. Inside zone was a figment of your imagination in that game. It just didn't happen. Therefore, using J.J. McCarthy's legs really didn't happen. The way that you had seen it happen earlier in the season, using Donovan Edwards down inside the 5, where they got inside twice and scored 0 points from those trips, didn't happen. So I was sort of incredulous watching how it was unfolding. So here's what's funny. We were at the Peach Bowl, and that game's getting ready to happen, and I was on the field watching warm-ups, and I was standing there talking. Let me whisper. I was standing there talking with Urban Meyer, and he is watching the video board along with a lot of the other Ohio State staffers. And so it's kind of always a surreal environment. If you've ever been at that late playoff game, the early game's happening as your game's getting warmed up. And if you're in a stadium that has a big video board, like Mercedes-Benz has that ribbon board, it's on and the players can see it. And certainly the fans are reacting. So when TCU would score, Urban Meyer's just like going crazy, like a pure fanboy, just cheering like openly. And you're seeing some of the players on the field acknowledge it. And you're seeing some of the staffers on the sideline acknowledge it and like cheer. And all the while you're saying, hold on, we got a game that's going to kick off here in an hour. I'm not saying they weren't focused. I'm just saying it was a weird dynamic. But yeah, watching that unfold, and then just you knew what was immediately going to come after that. And that was Michigan lost. Okay, now we start up the Jim Harbaugh NFL rumor train, and that's going on even as we speak. So I was a little dumbfounded, to be honest with you. Not that they lost, but the manner in which they lost.
Is that going to transition? And I know we'll get into Georgia here in just a minute, but we've seen teams in the past where they get all up for one game and they put it all on the line. And then come that second game, and I'm not even just talking about playoffs. I could be talking about regular season as well. Can TCU do that again? Can they have that same type of energy? Can they play that same type of defense, and which was lacking in the third quarter? But I'm saying, can they get up for that type of game one more time?
I don't doubt they'll be up, but there are things that have to happen. You can call it disrespecting TCU if you want to. I fully respect the program, but we got to be real here. We're talking about a 12 or 13-point spread for a reason. There are things Georgia would have to do to assist them. Football happens that way sometimes. It just happened in the Michigan game. Michigan did some things to assist them. Credit TCU for grabbing the game and taking it. If Georgia doesn't do that, no, I don't think any amount of hype or being up will matter, because Georgia's a better team than you. They're that much better than you. If you can start to pull them out into the deeper end of making some mistakes, whether they be self-inflicted or whether you can steal a possession or two, onside kicks, fake punts, etc., all of which I think will have to be pulled out of the bag by TCU in this game.
OutKick 360 rolls on. College football playoff title games have averaged 64.5 points. Only 2 have finished below 60 points combined. Georgia's played in both of those games. Now, also consider that last year was trending that way, and then Jameis Williams got hurt. So, can TCU make this a high-scoring affair? If so, they're not only covering, they're in it in the fourth with a chance to win with Duggan at quarterback. I trust the Georgia defensive system and the fact, and Chad, I think you're on board with this too, if they were going to lose, it was going to be last week. It was going to be Ohio State. And the fact that they survived that, not only survived it, but came up with some massive plays.
Yeah.
You don't feel like they'll get off to that same sluggish start offensively to where they're then chasing. And then they catch up, right? They make plays. And I don't think the defense is gashed in the same manner.
Was it 2011 where Alabama beat LSU like 24-6 in a national championship game?
There was a 21-0 game.
21-0. That was the one. 21-0 in 2011. That's where everyone reached SEC fatigue. I think more than any other time.
Yeah.
I mean, that was 12 years ago, I guess 11 years ago when the game was played in early 2012. Feels like an eternity ago when you think about the offenses.
Yeah.
When you get to this point, and I don't know if it's just fatigue by the end of the season, but even with Georgia's great defense, we've seen the drop-off in the last few games leading into this, especially against Ohio State. Credit Ohio State's great offense for that also. I do think points will be scored in this game. I had this sense watching that win over Ohio State that this is the big hurdle that Georgia's got to clear, and once they cleared it, they weren't going to get a big challenge from TCU in the national championship game. I still feel that way going into this game. But man, oh man, what a story it would be. I've got like
what do you have?
It's like fuzz, but it's like a bug. I feel like that's all over me.
If I see it, I'll
Maybe
get it
I'm
for
going
you.
crazy too. I'm probably creating something that's on my head that doesn't exist. It came out of nowhere. There's a beat going off in my house right now, Hutton, that at times makes me think that it's like the Telltale Heart, that Edgar Allan Poe story. That I'm like slowly.
You're the only one who can hear it.
I'm slowly gonna go crazy, and something bad's gonna happen. But there's something going off in my house, and every time I get everybody in the house to finally be quiet to hear it, then I'll hear it somewhere completely different. I'll go into one area and think it's coming from in here.
So is it a smoke detector?
And then it'll go somewhere else. It's not a smoke detector. It's some toy of one of the kids or something that's the battery's dying or something's going on with it. Anyway.
Well, when Chad finds this toy.
I think that's now, it's pervaded my entire life, and now I've got fuzz that doesn't even exist that I feel like is on my forehead. Georgia's going to win, though.
Yeah, Georgia's winning this game. I think TCU can cover, though. Is it still 12, 12.5?
12.5.
Yeah, I wish I could have jumped on this a little bit earlier to get an extra half point or a full point, really. I've seen people that have them, maybe they've teased it up a bit. But I think TCU can keep this less than 2 touchdowns tonight. They're certainly capable. To do that, they'll have to continue to prove everybody wrong because, again, we're sitting here counting them out. Georgia's winning this game. And you can see, according to 24/7 Sports, the recruiting classes and the dominance of Georgia through all this. And, the rich get richer. Meanwhile, TCU and the job, the coach. I mean, when you see the recruiting classes, Chad, this is why they were picked 7th in the Big 12. The perception of what's on their roster versus what they've done, which is answer the bell week in, week out.
Yeah, and they've got a top 15, top 20 class coming in next year. They've got, so far, the best, if not the best, one of the best incoming transfer classes coming into TCU. So that statistic's about to get a little bit better. But 45th, 54th, 23rd, 32nd does not make a national champion. This would buck every trend in talent if they beat Georgia in this game. Because people like to, laugh at people who pay attention to recruiting rankings and all that. Bottom line is, to win it all, you got to be top 5 consistently. And not just flash in the pan top 5. The one outlier to even make it to the game was Oregon, I want to say, in the last 10 years. If you really look to the teams that make it, I mean, they were, top 25, but never truly elite in recruiting when they were going.
So by getting to the playoff, I wonder how it affects you, in TCU potentially winning it, how it would affect those numbers especially in the transfer portal, because it already has, right? They've got one of the top classes in that area, plus they're doing what you'd say top 20, top 25 in recruiting total. But like Cincinnati, if Cincinnati made another run and they were back in, right? Like, could you keep that momentum going even though Luke Fickell is out? The fact that Sonny Dykes is in versus the years we're seeing there where Sonny Dykes is at, he's down the street. Now you've got Sonny Dykes and his recruiting plan in place. A chance for TCU to pick up the momentum because they're going to hold the mantle in that conference.
I really think, we talked about Georgia as a dynasty earlier, and that's what's forming. I think they're about to win back-to-back national championships. I'll be shocked if we come back tomorrow on this show and we're talking about TCU as national champs with purple and white confetti raining down at SoFi Stadium. I'll be shocked.
Yeah.
So 2 in a row, they're forming a dynasty. They're not going anywhere. They're recruiting at a nationally elite level every single year. There's no sign of a drop-off anywhere in the near future. But for TCU, great opportunity here. With Texas and Oklahoma leaving, I think Oklahoma State is in kind of an odd spot right now, even though I think Mike Gundy is one of the better coaches in the country with what he's done with that program. TCU, Baylor has got a good opportunity. With who's left behind in the Big 12, someone's going to get to the 12-team playoff routinely. TCU's got as good a shot as anyone to be nationally relevant after this run. I don't think this has to be some flash in the pan, one and done for Sonny Dykes. They could be a year in, year out competing for a 12-team playoff spot.
And here's the thing. Program. Here's what I want. Fourth quarter competition tonight. If you look at some of the final scores and the championship game results, you can see some lopsided ones and some also really tight games. But those are few and far between when it comes to the championship game results. Give me a close game tonight, but I'm taking Georgia.
Yeah, so Russell in our YouTube chat says TCU's recruiting rankings over the last 4 years is akin to Syracuse as a reference. So that's crazy to think about Syracuse going to a national championship game and playing Georgia. Look, for that reason and the fact that I just think that Georgia's cleared the big hurdle, I think Bulldogs end up winning and covering the spread. I'm going to go 41-24. I think they're up 10, and they get a late touchdown to really put it away. Georgia rolls in this game by 17.
I'm taking TCU to cover, but it probably comes down to a garbage.
And I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's a last possession game. Yeah. I'm with you. Let's go. Let's go down to the wire.
We'll be recapping it tomorrow either way. You can check out OutKick as well, where Trey Wallace has got you covered tonight from Los Angeles. Plenty of headlines as well. Join us tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern, across the OutKick
in my
Network.
House tonight. It's going to happen.